Good evening and welcome to Spirit Radio. I am your host, Willie Hassell. Along with my co-host, Lynn Nickerson, we will take you on a journey into the unknown where the paranormal becomes the normal. A journey to a world cloaked in darkness where reality becomes a thin veil. So sit back, relax, and join us as we venture into the shadows, the darkness, the unknown, and back. And good evening and welcome once again to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. I am your host, Willie Hassell, your gatekeeper to the dark side, your guide to the realm of the unknown, the unseen, the unthinkable. And she is the always lovely, she is the mystical, she is the mysterious, Lynn Nickerson.
Good evening, Willie, and happy Valentine's Day.
And happy Valentine's Day to you.
Thank you, and to all our listeners, happy Valentine's Day.
That's right, happy Valentine's Day.
And I hope it's a heck of a lot warmer wherever anyone else is. It's like zero, one degree here right now.
Well, it was 1 degree when we came in. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Might be 10 below by now.
It's pretty scary. But then, you heard the weather is supposed to go up, all of 40 degrees in a couple of days.
Yeah, I know it.
Weird, very weird.
Hey, what is it they say? That's New England, right?
That's New England. But then again, I wonder what it's like in Colorado. Perhaps we're going to find out.
Yeah, perhaps we will. It's probably not too much warmer there, but hey,
yeah.
You never know. So anyway, for those who are keeping score at home, tonight is the 120th episode of Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience.
Oh, well, congratulations.
And to us.
To us.
And it is our pleasure to welcome back Richard Estep. By day, Richard is a paramedic and volunteer firefighter. By night, he is a paranormal investigator who has spent the last 20 years investigating claims of ghosts and hauntings, both back in his homeland of England as well as here in the United States, where Richard is co-founder of the Boulder County Paranormal Research Society. He is also the author of several books on the paranormal, including In Search of the Paranormal, and his latest release, The World's Most Haunted Hospitals. So tonight on the show, we will examine some of the most haunted hospitals in the world. Some of them are well known, others less so. Some are now in ruins and completely demolished, while others are still functioning and working as hospitals to this day. The one thing they all have in common is a link to the world beyond the living. So join us tonight once more on Spirit Radio for this journey of the souls who have departed or maybe remained in these haunted institutions. And let us welcome now to the show Richard Estep. Good evening, Richard. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing very well. How are you?
We're doing good.
Hi, Richard. Nice to have you on.
A little bit chilly, but good.
So how cold is it there?
It's a pleasure to be invited back. It's a chilly day, but not terrible. There's no snow, at least.
Well, that's good. So can you validate or give an evaluation of the temperature?
You know what? I honestly couldn't. I haven't left the house all day because I've been writing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We'll take that.
Well, we've both read your book, and it's really interesting. There's an incredible amount of research that you've put into this, and I know you've done internet research as well as having interviewed many of the employees, the volunteer workers, both low-profile and high-profile paranormal investigators. And I know that it's not always easy tracking these people down, especially when you have a publishing deadline to meet. But anyway, you ferreted out some pretty impressive feedback because of the sources that who contributed. So this leads me to two things that stand out most in my mind about having read the book. Number one is the fact that in almost every one of the accounts in this book in particular, there's something unique that transpired in the world of the paranormal, which I haven't confronted before. So that's number one. Number two is there are 3 instances at least where weathered scientific type investigators say that they have no desire to return to a certain location because of the negativity associated with it, be it either physically environmental or spiritually environmental. So I found that very impressive, and I've often wondered, just how much negativity does a place have to have before an investigator says, okay, enough is enough, I'm out of here. So in total, I found at least 4 locations that I never would have gone to in the first place, because some of them just have this very high, scary creep factor. So I wanted to begin, Richard, with Asylum 49, and I know you're writing a book about that, so we won't tarry too long with that, because I don't want to give up all of your secrets. But what I found interesting about this is you talked about the ghost box, and there was a response on the ghost box. It was a full sentence, and it said, "My name is Robert," and come to find out, there was a Robert there, and also, too, Kim, who was the owner-operator of the place, she sort of poked fun at one of the ghosts, calling him a clown, and apparently it was Robert. And so would you like to kind of continue with what's going on at Asylum 49?
Certainly, and the first thing I would say is that Kim is a man, he's not a woman.
Oh, it is? Okay.
At least to the best of my knowledge, so I hope he's listening.
Yeah, there was a reference a couple of times.
49 it's a fascinating location, and in order to research the book, I went to visit. It was a relatively drivable distance, 500 miles door to door from Colorado to Salt Lake City. So I took a couple of my fellow investigators, and we drove down one weekend, and I found enough material there that I said, this deserves a bigger canvas, which is what led to me writing a full book about the place. But what's so interesting is that although it's active all year round, I moved in for a week with my team, and we did that over Halloween. And although it's active all year round, it is insanely active September, October, and November. And that's because you have something like 38,000 people coming through there by their estimation each Halloween season. And so it's an old community hospital which fell into disrepair and was allowed to close. And when they closed it, they didn't take everything out of there and gut the place. They left it. Mm-hmm. So it literally is a hospital. There are beds that people lived and died in. There are x-ray machines. There are defibrillators. There is an emergency room. It's a hospital. And it's played well on TV. For example, if you saw the miniseries of Stephen King's The Stand,
right,
it played the Boulder Community Hospital in that TV series, which is kind of ironic because I've taken many real patients to the Boulder Community Hospital in my time as a paramedic. But it gets extremely active, and the activity always peaks when you have this large number of people going through what is now a haunted house attraction. So I like to refer to Asylum 49 as a haunted house.
An extra haunted house, and it's connected to a working what do you call it?
I forgot. A rest home, isn't it?
Rest home, thank you.
Yeah, it's what we call a SNF, a skilled nursing facility or a rest home. Yeah, but to go one better, the building neighbors the town cemetery.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The building what?
It's right next to the town cemetery.
Yes, yeah, which
so
makes it more active.
You have this haunted house, and then you have this nursing home, you have this cemetery, all really rolled into one, geographically speaking. So it makes for a very interesting energy dynamic.
I kind of have to wonder what the people in the nursing home, how they feel about being connected to a haunted hospital, Well, that could be, yeah.
Maybe it's not really important to them.
Well, and honestly, it's an aspect of the situation that I kept my nose out of, just out of respect for the occupants of the nursing home. But the nursing home is moving fairly shortly, and so the entire building then, I think, will become Asylum 49. That's something that's on the slate for the next 18 months to 2 years. But if you saw the episode of Ghost Adventures, which centered on this location, that the team there did interview some of the nursing staff, and they had plenty of stories of their own.
What do you think about that response, "My name is Robert," on the ghost box?
Well, when and I wasn't able to put this in haunted hospitals because it hadn't happened yet, but when we moved in October, just gone, we took our own ghost box. We used the SB11 spirit box, and we were getting some incredible responses. what was rather disturbing is that a number of them, where my female investigators were concerned, were somewhat graphically sexual in nature. And there was one in which the team was experimenting, and my last name, came through the ghost box.
Really?
And and then just to put me in my place, the word a-hole.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So
somebody didn't like you, huh?
You know, I haven't.
I did check to make sure my ex-wife was still alive.
A lot of people don't lend too much credence to the ghost boxes, but when you get full sentences like that, it came up with your name and then Robert's name. You got to take a second look. You know, that's pretty.
I was one of them. I've been very, very openly, vocally skeptical about the spirit boxes and ghost boxes, and I thought it was just a case of basically auditory pareidolia. I thought that we're hearing snatches of static that seem to make sense. But and I think there is an element of that involved, don't get me wrong. But that being said, using it under the right circumstances in the right location, you can get some truly remarkable results.
Responses, yeah.
Or you can get nothing, depending.
Well, how about if we don't want to talk about that too much, because I know you're writing a book. One of the next ones that really piqued my interest, that I found really exceptionally frightening, was the Clark Air Base Hospital in the Philippines. Talk about a dark place. And
well, it's interesting that you should say that, because I talked to a number of people, and that's one of the locations you referred to at the beginning of the program, when you said that you had seasoned paranormal investigators that would never step foot there again. And I definitely heard that when I interviewed Barry Fitzgerald, the Irish investigator from Ghost Hunters International. And Barry said, you could not write me a check big enough to get me into the basement of Clark Air Base again.
That's amazing.
And Barry's very seasoned and very experienced.
Yes.
He's not new at this, and he's not given to just running when the mood takes him. He's very steady. And yet at the same time, I interviewed a number of service people that had been at Clark, and they said, this was one of the happiest times of my life in my service career. It was a great posting. There was a wonderful family atmosphere. So I think a lot of it depends upon when somebody was there and what their perspective was. Because Clark was one of those, was the first stop off on the way back from Vietnam for a lot of wounded American servicemen that were coming back to the States. So you had just these plane loads of traumatized, physically and emotionally traumatized young men coming through during the years of the Vietnam conflict. And I think that has to leave some kind of scar, doesn't it?
It must. And also, too, a lot of people that were there, either working there or whatever, they probably didn't frequent the basement.
That's true. And Barry is convinced that there is something very dark and elemental in that basement.
Yes.
It's the basement of the hospital that he's most concerned with.
I mean, it's hard enough to put up with an anaconda in the elevator shaft.
Yeah, I know it.
Let alone the darkness in the basement.
Yeah, he said something non-human.
Non-human,
is that
elemental.
correct?
Yeah. And the other thing, Richard, was this was one of the events that really kind of shocked me. The security guard, the off-duty security guard, he was on duty at the time, but he saw a soldier who had no face, and he offered him a cigarette. Would you like to tell us that story?
Yeah, so the night security staff, one of the security guards encountered a U.S. serviceman who was faceless and kind of wordlessly asked him for a cigarette, which he just, I guess, was stunned and turned one over to this spirit, who then went on to disappear.
But he lit the cigarette for him.
He did light the cigarette.
Yes.
And I think it's the faceless component that's most disturbing, isn't it?
Yes. Well, that and then the cigarette, the man, they just disappeared. Everything disappeared, including the physical cigarette.
And it makes one wonder, was this genuinely the apparition of a service person, or was it something imitating one, if Mr. Fitzgerald's theory is correct?
Well, either that, or there was just an interfacing of two dimensions.
Possibly, but if so, it would have to be physical because the cigarette was taken. It was physically taken.
Exactly, yeah. But physical things do disappear like reports. So it's certainly plausible and possible. It's something to think about. I just found that fascinating. Is there anything else that you had to say about Clark Air Base?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention about Clark Air Base?
Was there anything that I wanted to mention? Well, yeah, it's as of right now, at least it's back in operation after having been abandoned for so many years.
Really?
U.S. forces but not fully, but American forces are performing exercises out of there, so we see U.S. Marines and service personnel back at Clark. I just think that's rather nice. It shows how cyclical history can be.
Yes, I know.
And again, once you have this influx of human energy again in a location, it makes me wonder if the activity will pick up once more.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. Weren't they considering either selling it off and turning it into a spa or something?
Yeah, that was one of the many plans that were in consideration, and I guess those plans fell through. Clark itself has quite a long and a very storied history going back many years because of its strategic location. But right now it's being used by the local military, and the American forces are pretty much guests as and when needed.
Well, that's good that it's being put back to use. One of the next locations that kind of got me was the Spencer State Hospital in West Virginia in the U.S. And the fact that they had performed so many lobotomies there and so many people were ruined or they died, that there must be a great deal of negative energy in that location.
Well, and when you look at the hospitals, I did include, as they were called, insane asylums and mental health care institutions. Truly, that type of facility could have gotten its own book. But yeah, you're correct. I don't think it's any coincidence that there is a very high prevalence of reported paranormal activity at former mental health care institutions. And I think that back when Spencer State and similar facilities were open and actually housing patients, conditions were pretty miserable.
Oh, terrible.
And and the lobotomy was a barbaric procedure in which, I don't know if you know, but they used to perform it by going through the eye socket. So essentially somebody was hammering an eye stake through your eye socket in order to do it and to cause targeted brain damage.
And often without anesthesia.
Often without anesthesia, often by relatively unskilled surgeons, because everybody has to learn, right? Mm-hmm. So, you worry about the people that were used as teaching subjects.
Oh.
So, it's a horrific and barbaric procedure, and thousands of them were performed, many of them at Spencer State.
Travesty. Oh. And then did they demolish the whole building? Because they did build a Walmart over part of that.
Yeah, they did. Pretty much the entire thing is now gone. There is a cemetery if you go there, with a number of graves in it. So a cemetery is pretty much the last real remnant of Spencer State.
Wow. Now, I just wonder how active Walmart is now.
I wonder.
That actually would be an interesting question, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I wonder how even their business is doing, let alone crazy people.
Somebody should investigate the Walmart there. Huh?
Yeah.
Home things are on rollback this week, if we're allowed to say that.
Yeah, 10% off.
We do have a friend, as a matter of fact, who saw some kind of apparition in a Walmart, if you can believe that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
Andy did.
Sure, I can.
Andy Kidd.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean,
tell that story.
That does happen. I don't know the whole thing, but he saw some kind of crazy kid on a skateboard.
Yeah, it was a young kid, I remember. And,
Yep, and he just disappeared in front of his eyes.
And,
Well, I mean, it's not really hard to believe that the famous ghost photograph from the Toys R Us in California, if you recall that.
Oh, no, I haven't heard about that.
Oh, you should actually look at that photograph. In fact, if you Google Toys R Us California apparition or something like that, you'll see it.
Sure.
It was one of the clearest apparition photographs ever taken. And that particular Toys R Us was haunted by the ghost of a young man in his late teens.
Oh, really?
And he's very clearly visible, seen slouching against the wall, watching the paranormal investigators who don't know he's there.
Oh, my. So was he a former employee?
I don't know. That's what's interesting. And the shot was taken in the dark with infrared film. So he truly was observing them from out of the darkness.
Oh, my,
and
that's amazing.
It's kind of scary how much clarity you have of this apparition.
Oh, my. Have you seen the one from 3 Men and a Baby? Is that the name of it? 3 Men
That's actually a myth. 3 Men and a Baby, if you actually look at that image, it's a picture of Ted Danson. And it was a cardboard cutout of him wearing a top hat and tail that had been left in shot as part of the set dressing. So the so-called story of 3 Men and a Baby being filmed in a haunted house is not true. It was filmed on a movie set, which has no paranormal activity associated with it.
Well, then what about the child behind the curtain?
So that's not a child. That's Ted Danson. It's a cardboard cutout of him. And again, if you go look that one, yeah, you can see close-ups of that. Either on your own DVD or you can see it on the web. But it's actually Ted Danson in a top hat and tail that just happens to look like a kid, and an urban legend grew up around it.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, I'll have to re-research that.
Tales grow in the telling, don't they?
Yeah. Well, how about, I'm not sure if this is the correct pronunciation, but Poveglia Island in Venice.
If you want to look at a place that ought to be haunted, I mean, Poveglia is the place, isn't it?
Oh, I had seen it once on, I think, the World's Scariest Places, and that was petrifying enough. And then
it really does, and the whole island is coated in this residue of ash, which is at least partially made up of the bodies that were buried there.
Cremated human corpses.
So, looking back on the days of the plague, Venice was hit particularly hard. Venice, Italy. Suffered greatly with the plague. And so Poveglia performed a number of functions. I mean, at one point it was regarded as being somewhat similar to Ellis Island, as a place of quarantine.
Mm-hmm.
But pretty soon they were sending plague victims there to die and then burying them on the island. So thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of plague victims either died or were interred on that island.
Yeah, the death toll was mentioned at 100,000 or more.
Yeah, and that
Tragic.
may well be conservative.
Wow. And wasn't it the plague from the 1700s that when they started bringing bodies there?
They started ferrying them out. In fact, there was a regular shipping run from the mainland, and that's kind of bad when you have to lay on a plague express on a regular basis, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And they would just load these poor bodies onto the boat. They would ferry them out, drop them off, and go back again and keep going until they were done.
Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, absolutely terrible.
And it's only 17 acres, so they had to start cremating them. I'm sure they would have run out of space.
Absolutely.
A lot
that's
of
where,
suffering.
again, a lot of this ash, this residue, comes from. So you really are walking on the dead when you walk on Poveglia.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you should be able to do it, because the island is pretty much off limits according to the local authorities.
Mm-hmm.
From people I've interviewed, because I wasn't able to get them myself, there is a fairly brisk trade, if you will, of people ferrying tourists out for a quick walk around, and the local police frown on it.
Yeah.
But I gather it's not on their high list of priorities to prosecute.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on there, though? Is that building occupied or in use at all?
No, the entire island is deserted and abandoned, and yet pretty regularly lights and figures are seen, particularly after nightfall.
Oh.
So the locals, there are a lot of superstitions attached to Poveglia. So the local folks really do not like to go near the place or pay much attention to it, even though it's right there on their doorstep.
Mm.
And there was an attempt, because the Italian government auctioned Poveglia off, or tried to, in 2014. And an Italian businessman actually managed to get the lease on it for 99 years. so close enough for government work. And that cost him the equivalent of $700,000, which is kind of a steal when you think about it.
But who would want to buy it?
Yeah.
Why?
And the local folks also, the local people had tried to crowdsource their own attempt to buy it, because there is a rumor, and I don't know how far advanced this is yet, that he wants to put a luxury hotel on the island.
Insane.
Well, quite literally, because there was indeed an insane asylum on the island. So hopefully that doesn't go ahead, because I can't speak for you, but I would not really want to spend the night there.
No, and I don't see how a business could possibly survive and thrive there, not with everything that's working against it. Richard, we are right at the bottom of the hour, so what we're going to do is take a break for a couple of minutes, and when we come back, I'd like to talk about what happened to the team members of Ghost Adventures, because they had quite a few experiences while they were on Prevalia. So we're talking to Richard Estep right now. He is the author of The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Don't go away. Supernatural Magazine, the UK's newest paranormal magazine, provides support to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. It is the magazine's goal to bring every aspect of supernatural news and research from around the world under one roof to create a universal platform for all those interested in the supernatural. More information is available at supernaturalmagazine.com. You are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM, and we'll be right back after this short break.
And you are listening to Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience on WSCA 106.1 FM in Portsmouth, West End. And from the community calendar, it is time to get out your skates, because seasonal skating is now open at the Puddle Duck Pond at Strawberry Bank. The rink will be open daily 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. now until February 29th. Skate rentals, sharpening, and lessons will also be available. There will even be free skating at selected times, Tuesdays through Thursdays. For further information can be found on their website, puddleduckpond.org, or by calling them at 603-422-0600. And the pond is located at Strawberry Bank Museum at 14 Hancock Street in Portsmouth. And also from the community calendar, Paranormal Evidence Review with Spirit Chasers Paranormal. The team from Spirit Chasers Paranormal will be holding an evening of paranormal fun and education on March 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. on the new Soundstage 909 right here at the WSCA studio located at 909 Islington Street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. This event is being held to benefit the WSCA Portsmouth Community Radio, and more information is online at spiritchasersparanormal.com.
And for our upcoming guest list, it starts with February 20th. Steve Parsons will be joining us from the UK, and he's regarded as one of the foremost investigators of the paranormal. He holds classes on ghosts and has now organized the principles of his teachings in a book titled Ghostology. February 27th, our friend Richard Southall, author of Haunted Route 66, was booked for this date, but he's now facing a schedule constraint. So for the moment, the date is open, but we'll be rescheduling Rich in the near future. March 5th, Preston Dennett will be back. He's an investigator with MUFON, and he's joining us to preview his latest release titled Not From Here. March 12th, Sam Queen and Jamie Davis co-wrote Haunted Asylums, Prisons, and Sanatoriums. Prisms are something different. So, Zan was last on our show on November 21st, 2015. And during that interview, we didn't have enough time to cover all of the material, so he's returning, and he's going to continue with the tales from this book in these insanely haunted locations. And March 19th, our good friend Tom Spitaleri, director of Essex County Ghost Project, is returning to our studio to talk about some of his latest investigations, as well as surprise us of the latest lineup of speakers for the Parafest conference, which is coming up in April. And that concludes our guest list.
All right, excellent. And so now, shall we go back to the phone for tonight's guest? Welcome back, Richard.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Richard. So we were talking about Poveglia?
Poveglia.
Poveglia, there we go. Poveglia Island in Venice, Italy. So Ghost Adventures went there, and they had quite a time. Would you like to continue with that, Richard?
Yeah, they did have quite the time there, quite the evening. And I recommend watching the show, which I believe is on YouTube, to see the full effect of it. But there are a number of things that stand out. And perhaps one of my favorite parts of that is not so much all the dramatic stuff. I know there is a sequence where Zach appears to be overcome by some dark force and possessed. But what most interested me, believe it or not, was an EVP that they captured.
And what was that?
I've always wondered why, when you investigate in a place like that, why on earth would a team of American investigators expect
English?
to get English EVP?
Mm-hmm.
So what was fascinating was that they captured this EVP, and it was only when they brought in a local, someone that actually had grown up in the area of Poveglia and knew the native dialect, that found out that they had captured something that sounded meaningful, that seemed to be saying, come here, in the voice of an old man in the local native dialect.
Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool.
Yeah, that is.
It really is.
That is a very good point. Why would, in a foreign country, why would you expect an EVP to be in English?
No,
yeah,
no.
So that is a very good piece of evidence.
Yeah.
It is. I enjoy the fact that it just turns our inherent cultural bias on its head.
Yeah. Well, there were some other things that happened both to Aaron Goodwin and Zach, and they do an awful lot of provocation, and they kept offering to for the spirits to use their energy or their bodies, and I just think that's a big mistake. But they did get some results. So, would you like to mention that? Zach going berserk?
Yeah, they did. Aaron Goodwin, I know, focused on the bell tower. And with Poveglia, it's kind of difficult to separate the fact from folklore. But one piece of, although it is a fact that the island has its mental institution, that building, by the way, was supposed to be renovated during the 60s, and to this day, the scaffolding is still surrounding it from where the workmen began to do it.
And they just deserted
and then abandoned it.
Yeah.
Without apparent cause after just a few weeks of working there. But there is a legend that the doctor who ran that facility, that institution, was something less than sane himself. That he began to see ghosts, and that he allegedly mistreated the inmates of his asylum to the point where the spirits of some of the dead inmates are supposed to have chased him to the top of the bell tower, and he leapt to his death.
That's divine justice.
Yeah, it's certainly a great story. As to whether there's more than a grain of truth in there, it's very difficult to say. But Aaron Goodwin, I think, made a pretty decent choice in choosing that as his location. Mm-hmm. And he gave it the old college try to try and speak in makeshift Italian, but really wasn't able to do that. But when he started asking about the fact that, hey, is there somebody here with me? He was hearing a pretty loud thud, and then a howl. I think it was probably just coincidental, the howl of this animal.
Oh,
Richard?
We've lost Richard.
Yeah. Okay, then. Okay. I'm going to try and get Richard back.
Right,
Coming back.
Okay, Richard, are you back with us?
I am back with you. That was an interesting disconnect.
It was. It was. I don't know. There must be a ghost on the line somewhere, I guess.
Somebody doesn't like us talking about Pavalia, apparently.
That could be it.
That could be it. All right, so you were talking about Aaron up in the bell tower?
We were talking about Aaron in the bell tower who was attempting to investigate there, and we just talked about the fact that he had this thud, which implied that there may be someone or something in there with him. Whereas Nick Groff was taking a slightly different tack, and he was trying to offer medicine to any spirits that might be present, which I think is an interesting and friendly approach.
Mm-hmm.
So what he got was quite interesting. He got what he thought was the sound of a male voice speaking within the same building as him.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of indistinct, so he wasn't able to make out any words, but this was something he heard with his own ears and was recorded. And as he went off to go try and investigate that, it looks like there was some kind of dark, shadowy form moving across the room that he'd been in, caught on one of the night vision cameras, and there was a moaning noise that they could not quite explain either. So all kind of indistinct stuff, and a certain amount of it might be explained away by the fact that you're in a relatively open-air ruined building at night.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have to wonder.
Yeah. Have there been reports of people seeing something jumping off from the bell tower?
So that is the local legend. So there are reports of that, but again, as we know, tales do grow in the telling. And the local attitude towards Pavalia, bear in mind that normally having an island on your doorstep would be quite nice. It'd be a great place to go boat out to, wouldn't it? Most of the locals avoid the place,
But
no
not
pun
this
intended, like the plague.
Yeah. Yeah, no pun.
Not a place that they go for an afternoon barbecue.
So
It's not, and having talked to a couple of people that did go to Pavalia, they said, the atmosphere actually during the daytime at least is very peaceful. It's very tranquil. But just knowing the history and knowing why it is the way that it is, again, would be extremely discomforting.
So Aaron felt some kind of energy run through his body, but then Zach got very aggressive and kind of went berserk. And he later said that he didn't recall experiencing much of anything except seeing things through like a red filter.
Yeah, as if a red filter came down. I know that in fiction it's a stereotype, isn't it? We say
blood red eyes.
The red eyes, the red mist descended. That's usually a way we use to describe someone being overcome with anger and not knowing what they're doing, not being fully in control. And one of the things that's quite disconcerting about that, if you watch the show, is that he has a machete at the time.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a handy thing on an island like that because there's a lot of vegetation. But
not when you're berserk, though.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
Not when
frightening.
you're having these memory lapses and you're not in control of yourself.
No, frightening.
And wasn't he like going after Aaron too at the time?
I don't know.
Well, his he was getting very, very aggressive and very belligerent.
Yeah.
And it's worth noting, and I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this, but Zach's approach can be very provocative.
Mm-hmm.
He is very much a come and get me, do your worst.
Right.
I challenge you. In fact, he said exactly that on numerous occasions.
Mm.
So whereas the other two guys on that team tended to be a little bit more laid
Reserved.
back, a little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit less in your face.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if that approach wasn't something that had come back to bite him.
Yeah, I do
Very
wonder.
well could be. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you ask for. Is there anything else you'd like to comment about Pavalia? Pavalia.
Pavalia?
Yeah, Pavalia. There we go.
It's I'm interested to see what they do with it because it's a beautiful place with a horrendous history. It's relatively small. It's very picturesque. I don't think the new owner is not going to simply let it rest on its laurels, and I don't think he's going to leave it as a ruin. So if industrialization or if commercialization does come to Pavalia, it will be interesting to see what effects that has on the activity.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's no place I want to visit real soon.
It's not on your list, huh?
It's not on my list. How about the University College Hospital in London? What I found really intriguing about that place was the cursed portrait of the doctor. Of course, it could be hearsay, but there seemed to be a lot of deaths associated with that doctor's portrait.
Well, and it used to be the job. It was a designated task that the portrait was covered up at a specific time, and it was considered to be very, very, very bad luck if you were to fall asleep underneath the portrait.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, in fact, the story attached to it, the legend attached to it, was that if you did so, you would die fairly quickly.
And apparently that did happen.
Well, and then the portrait was stolen. And so its whereabouts are currently unknown, and I just cannot help having a macabre turn of mind, wondering whether that particular portrait was hung over somebody's head.
Oh, jeez. Why do you suppose that? Was the doctor considered another, madman, or was some kind of curse directed at the portrait, do you think?
Not at all. I think that Britain, one of the things that it's not unique to Britain, but having a lot of stately homes and very historic buildings, stories of haunted portraits and paintings are not at all uncommon in the UK. So I think it really relates to that. It's a part of our ghost lore, our ghostly folklore.
So,
I don't think there's anything particularly sinister behind the subject of the portrait or anything like that.
Not like the doctor in the bell tower.
Not like the doctor in the bell tower.
Okay.
And University College is still very much a hospital that is in operation today.
Oh, that's good. The other really sad story there is Lizzie Church, who wound up attending to her fiance, in the late 19th century?
Mm-hmm.
And she had a mishap.
Yeah, the tragedy there, and it is a tragedy, is that, well, firstly, you should never end up caring for
a loved one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's supposed to have happened that she was caring for her fiance and unintentionally delivered an overdose of a narcotic painkiller.
Yes.
Yeah. And her ghost is seen whenever pain-killing medications like morphine are used on the ward.
Wow.
And the impression that the nursing staff have, those that have seen her, are that she's kind of keeping a watchful eye out, and she's basically saying, watch your dosing. Be
really
very,
tragic.
very careful. Yeah, it seems like it's a haunting that's grounded in remorse.
Yeah.
Which is a particularly strong emotion, isn't it?
Truly. There's no taking it back.
No, there really isn't. And that's ironic, because as somebody who teaches paramedics, that's one of the principles I teach over and over again. When it comes down to administering drugs like morphine, where if you give too much, you will stop the patient from breathing and kill them. We always teach you can always give more, but you can never take it back. So we teach administration in small increments.
But there is an antidote, right? Something to reverse the process now?
We do have an antidote now called naloxone, or more commonly it's called Narcan. But it was not something that would have been available in her day.
Right. Yeah, it's so unfortunate.
Tragic.
Really. We don't have a whole lot of time left, so I wanted to cover the old Shanghai Hospital in Singapore.
Oh, Changi.
Changi, okay.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating place. Again, people who went there said a lot of them don't want to return.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like to give us a little background on that place?
Yeah, absolutely. So the old Changi Hospital in Singapore was a British military facility back in the 1930s. When Singapore fell to the Japanese, it actually became a base for the Japanese secret police, effectively the Japanese version of the Gestapo.
Yeah.
And it was one of the locations they would use to extract information from prisoners, whether they were captured service personnel or civilians. And of course, their methods were particularly brutal and very heinous. So there was a lot of torture, a lot of pain, a lot of agony and misery inflicted within that location. Now, after the war, it became a hospital, the old Changi Hospital, because now there is a new one, and the old one has been allowed to fall into ruin.
Oh.
And having talked with some of the paranormal investigators that have been into Changi, most of the activity there seems particularly dark and malicious.
Oh.
So this is not a tragic, although the basis of it is tragic. It's not a romantic, friendly kind of haunting.
No. So much pain and torture.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think that just like with Clark Air Base, that leaves a scar, and it's some
That's
kind
right.
of psychic scar.
Really difficult to cleanse something like that.
Yeah.
So,
And the activity that's associated with it, when you talk to the witnesses or read their accounts,
mhm.
it is all very, very physical. You're getting accounts of people taking home some kind of spiritual attachment. They wake up in the middle of the night with a sensation of being unable to breathe, as though they're being suffocated or choked.
Not good. And some of them, they could still smell the stench of blood or sanitizing chemicals. And there was
various olfactory phenomena like that, blood and chemical, hearing people retching and vomiting, those sorts of things.
oh, disconcerting. And then there was a figure with long white hair that one woman saw in a tree, and she fainted.
Yeah, and that's when you get to that part of the world. Now these are becoming kind of archetypal ghosts. That type of figure is every bit as familiar in that part of the world as in our part of the world. We have our gray ladies and our blue ladies and stuff. It's a fairly common archetype there. But Changi has more than its share. And if you'd actually like to look around the place, there is a movie which, I'll be careful what I say, but let's say it's probably not going to be an Oscar contender this year. And it's called Haunted Changi, which is worth watching purely for the fact that you get to look around Changi as it stands today. And it's not something you can do if you go to Singapore. The hospital is in private hands, and it's actually guarded by private security companies. But they made their equivalent of a Blair Witch type movie within Changi.
Well, I bet it has an audience. It may not be an Oscar winner, but
it does.
Yeah, I'm sure it will.
Yeah, there's some foolish people out there.
I was one of them, but my good friend Noel Boyd, he's an investigator for, he lives in Singapore, and he's part of a TV show called Ghost Files Singapore.
Oh.
He investigated Changi and said to me, pretty much everybody that grows up in Singapore has a Changi ghost story. Like they have a friend of a friend,
Really?
Yeah, because it's the thing where the local kids dare each other to do it. It's that place where people growing up, the kids would say, hey, let's run up to the fence at nightfall. Let's try and hop the fence and get in.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so he said that the stories are just legion about that place.
Was it Noel, or was it someone he knew that wound up getting possessed?
Noel didn't end up getting possessed in there, no, but knew of somebody that did, I believe. And he and his crew did go inside, too. They were able to make their way in. I'm not going to ask how he gained access, but you can actually see his episode of Ghost Files Singapore on YouTube if you go into that, and you can kind of take a look at their investigative methodology. It's a genuinely creepy and eerie place.
Yeah, that was my take on it, too.
But again, looking at the history of it, it's not remotely surprising, is it?
No, with all the torture and whatnot. You just can't cleanse a place like that. And I think people going there looking for a good time, they're asking for trouble. Spiritual, most likely, but even physical trouble. Good place to stay away from.
Absolutely. I mean, I know that it's human nature, isn't it? We all like to be on a roller coaster, or we like a scary movie because we know that it's safe, but we're kind of fooled into thinking it isn't. But when you do go into places like this, it's quite the opposite. It appears safe, but often may well not be.
That's right. Good place to stay away from.
Well,
Richard, we are at the end of the hour, unfortunately. This has been so interesting. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. I had a great time last time, and I had a great time tonight.
Terrific.
Excellent. You want to go ahead and give out where people can buy the book and websites, upcoming events, anything like that?
Certainly. The World's Most Haunted Hospitals was just released at the end of January. It's available from Amazon.com, of course, and all good physical bookstores also. My website is richardestep.net, and I love to hear people's opinions. I like to hear ghost stories and talk the paranormal with readers. So it would be great to connect with you if you're interested. And my next book will be The Haunting of Asylum 49, co-written with Cami Anderson. That will be released on August 22nd worldwide.
Excellent.
Okay,
Excellent. Yeah,
excellent.
we'll look forward to reading that.
Excellent. And I know you just had a very interesting trip back to England, didn't you?
How did that go?
I just got out of jail.
Witch's prison.
In a witch's prison in the UK for a week, and that was extremely interesting also.
And did you see anything?
You know, we got some interesting activity. I personally, I'm an agnostic, although I respect all belief systems. But I like to hedge my bets, and so I took along a Catholic priest. And we had a pretty active time of it, yeah.
Wonderful.
Okay.
We'll have to talk about that.
Okay, well, Richard, we thank you very much for joining us again tonight. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you,
It was a
Richard.
great pleasure being back. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay. Have a good night,
Good
Richard.
night.
Okay, well, that is Spirit Radio, the Paranormal Experience. And Craig Mosier is coming right up with the Graveyard Shift.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. You have a good evening.